Hey all you cool cats and kittens, welcome back to Remote Learning with Miss Corwin. We are going to be getting a new writing unit, and I'm so excited. This is one of my favorite writing units, and this is our narrative writing unit. This is what we're going to be spending the next couple weeks working on. But you may be asking, what is narrative writing? Well, most stories that you have read are narrative writing. If you can think of just a story in general, not necessarily an informational book, but like a story that's being told, that is usually narrative writing. So some examples of narrative writings that we've read this year include the book Schooled. We learned the story of how Capricorn Anderson went from that kind of hippie commune to school and learning how to act like a modern day student. We read this book Unschooled with our two friends who are competing during field day. It is telling their story of how they are competing. In the book Midnight Without a Moon, we are reading Rose's story about how she lived during the civil rights movement in Mississippi. In the book Holes, we didn't get very far, but we were learning about Stanley's story as he was going to this juvenile detention center in the middle of nowhere. If you've ever read a book like Diary of a Wimpy Kid, that's telling Greg's story. If you ever read a book like The War That Saved My Life, that is telling her story. So essentially, any book that tells you a story is some sort of a narrative writing. If you think of the word narrator, a narrator is somebody who helps to explain the story, who helps to tell the story. In this case, you're going to sort of be your own narrator in your narrative writing because we are going to be focusing on personal narrative stories. When I say personal narrative stories, what I mean is that we will be writing stories about things that have actually happened to us in our real lives. So we'll be writing about our own lives, memories, and feelings. We're not making up things. Everything that we write about has to be truthful. Think of this as sort of like an autobiography in a way, but not as in depth. We're just going to be talking about one thing that happened to us like one time. But everything that we're going to be writing about is going to be true. It's going to be about our lives, and it's going to be about things that truly happened to us, things we truly felt, memories we actually have. That's what I mean by a personal narrative story. You are telling your own story about something that happened to you sometime. So how are we going to be practicing writing? So it's kind of difficult with our remote learning process. There are absolutely stories I would love to read to you, but unfortunately, I don't have a lot of books here at my house. I didn't think we were going to be doing this whole remote learning process for so long. So we're going to be having some daily lessons. Our daily lessons might look something like these slides, where I give you some information and I talk to you in this sort of way. We're also going to be reading personal narrative stories. It's important to read personal narrative stories because there's been studies that show, like people who have done research have found out that when students are exposed to a lot of different kinds of stories, it makes their writing better too. So we're going to also be reading a lot of different personal narrative stories. Now, not every single story in here is actually going to be a personal narrative story. Not every single story that we're going to read and listen to is going to actually be written about and by the person who wrote it. But they are still good examples of what a personal narrative might look like. Yours are going to be true life. They're going to be about your own life. Some of them that we're reading about are only going to be sort of about people's lives. So just keep that in mind. We're going to be brainstorming some ideas. That means coming up with ideas that help you get started in writing. We're going to be actually writing, and we are also going to be editing. Editing means that we're going to fix our stories, fix them up and make them really, really good and make them as perfect as we can get them. There's a lot of little details that go into narrative writing, and we're going to try and get to all of them. So one of the things you're going to be working on today is creating your own heart map. You might be asking, Miss Corwin, I don't know what a heart map is, and that's okay. We're learning. We're all doing this together. A heart map is sort of just a list of all the things that are meaningful to you, all the things that you love. Not necessarily all the things, but a list of things that are meaningful and things that you love. So what are some of the things that you love in life? You don't have to write these in complete sentences, but do try to fill every bullet point. You're going to want to have as many ideas as possible. I leave a note over here that says think about families, pets, friends, places you love to go, foods, hobbies. A hobby is just something that you like to do, memories, anything that you love. So I made this example of a heart map. I include things like I love hanging out with my mom. That's one of my favorite things to do. Zach is my dog, and I also put my cats here. So I have ideas that I could write about stories with things that happened with me and my mom. I could write about how I got my cats or my dog, or things that happened with my cats and my dogs that are funny or sad or any sort of thing in between. I put baking. I love to bake, and I could write so many different stories about some of the mistakes I've made while baking, or some things I've done right, or things I've been really proud of when baking. My favorite place to go in the whole world is the beach, and I've been to the beach so many times. I'm sure I could write some sort of story. Even right now, I'm thinking about one time I went to the beach and I wandered way too far away from my mom, and she got really scared and the police came. So, I mean, that could be a story that I could write about. I really love to go camping, so that's a fun thing that I love to do, and I could write stories about that. I love going on road trips. We went on road trips a lot when I was little, and I know that I could write stories about some of the things that we saw or some of the places that we went to when we were on a road trip. Something I really love to do is to paint, so I could include something about how I started painting or some things that I love to paint. In my room, actually, right now, I have one of my favorite paintings in the whole world, so I could write about how I got the idea to do that. I also love to do theater, as you all know, and I have so many different stories about things that happened while I did theater or things that I was able to do because of theater. I wrote fireflies here. This one kind of falls under that memory category, but one of my most favorite memories was the first time I ever saw fireflies, which was actually on one of my road trips, so I can kind of connect those two stories together. And another thing I have really good memories from is playing with my little brother. So these are all things that I could write about, things that happened to me in real life, things that impacted my real life that I could actually write about. So your job today is going to be to do the heart map on slide number 2. Try your best to fill out every single bullet, because if you were to do that, you would have way more ideas that will help you get started in your writing. And actually, so for now, we're actually going to be listening to this story. It's called My Mama Had a Dancing Heart, and it is by, I'm not sure if it's Liba Moore Gray, and it's illustrated by, looks like Raoul Colin. So this is the story that we're going to be reading. As I said before, not every single story is a personal narrative, but they all are narratives, and they're all things that could happen in real life. So this story is only about 3 minutes long. We're going to listen to this, and then we'll talk about some of it.
Mama Had a Dancing Heart by Liba Moore Gray. Mama had a dancing heart, and she shared that heart with me. With a grin and a giggle, a hug and a whistle, we'd slap our knees, and Mama would say, "Bless the world, it feels like a tip-tapping, song-singing, fingers-snapping kind of day. Let's celebrate!" And so we did. When a warm spring rain would come pinging on the window pane, we'd kick off our shoes, and out into the rain we'd go. We'd dance a frog-hopping, leaf-growing, flower-opening, hello spring ballet. High-stepping and splashing, the rain running down our faces, I'd slip-swish behind Mama through the newly green grass. And afterward, we'd read rain poems and drink sassafras tea with lemon curls floating. And in summer, when the waves would come, splashing on the shore, out we'd go into the red-orange morning, with kites and balloons tied to our wrists. We'd do a seabird flapping, dolphin arching, hello summer ballet, with me following Mama, the sand stuck between the toes for our up and down squish-squashing feet. And afterward, we'd seashell pile the windsill and drink lemonade cold. And when the cool autumn winds would come puffing through the clouds, and the hold-on-tight leaves would finally let go and flutter to the ground, out we'd go into the eye-blinking blue air, with Mama leading in a leaf-kicking, leg-lifting, hand-clapping Hello Autumn ballet. And afterwards, we'd wax paper press leaves, red and gold, and drink hot tea spiced. And when the winter snows came softly down, shawling the earth, out we'd go and do a body flat, arms moving up and down, snow angel, hello winter ballet. And then we'd stand up, Mama first, and dance in slow motion, like hand-mittened galoshes galumphing funny old snowmen. And afterward, we'd cut snowflakes, paper white delicate, and sip cocoa with marshmallows floating. And now, after satin ribboning my feet and listening to the violins sing swelling around me, onto the stage I go, air daring, leap flying, wing soaring, letting the spring rain, summer waves, autumn leaves, winter snow carry me along until the music slows and I feather float down, down to the ground. And afterward, I imagine that I hear my mama saying, "Bless the world, it feels like a tip-tapping, song-singing, finger-snapping kind of day. Let's celebrate." My mama had a dancing heart, and she shared that heart with me.
Awesome. So we can see in this story that this character, they don't even have a name actually in this story. This main character is telling us the story of how she and her mom would go out during each season and do something, but every time they went out, one thing that connected every single one of those things was they would dance in some sort of way. And while the book used really, really stylized language, which means that they would use words that don't usually go together. I remember them saying something about like a sea-shelved windowsill, meaning that like they put the seashells on the windowsill. It still conveyed that really nice message of, while nothing particularly exciting happened per se, there wasn't like any big exciting thing that happened, it was still really special because it was something that she remembered doing with her mom. And then this girl grew up to be a ballerina, a professional ballerina. So you can see how it had a really big impact on her life. So I bet if she were to do that heart map, she would write something in there about dance and dancing with her mama and collecting seashells on the windowsill and making snow angels in the snow and going to the beach, because those are all things she included in her story. So those are things that must have been really, really impactful for her. So your job for today is to go out and to do slide number 2, which is your heart map. Write things that you love, things that you remember, things that just bring you joy. And that's all I have for you today. So I will see you back here tomorrow. Bye, guys.